The chair calls Cindy Clemishire. Cindy, I have you here registered on behalf of yourself, testifying for House Bill 748. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Welcome back in front of our committee and to the Capitol.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you for having me back again. I don't know that any of us really need to say anything after that, but thank you for taking the time to hear my story. I've jotted down a few things and trying to stay on track with this.
Take your time.
Okay. As you already know, I am Cindy Clemishire. I'm from Oklahoma. I grew up in a small town, Hominy, in Osage County. I am a survivor of child sexual abuse that occurred, I'm still emotional that occurred between 1982 and 1987 when I was 12 to 17 years old. I was abused by Robert Morris, then a traveling evangelist who was married with one child, who went on to become the founding pastor of Gateway Church, one of the largest megachurches in America here in Texas. As I stated, the abuse started when I was 12 years old on Christmas night in 1982 while Robert Morris was staying in my family's home. The first time he made the premeditated decision to violate and defile my purity, he told me, and I quote, "You can never tell anyone because it will ruin everything." This abuse continued over and over and over until I finally told someone in 1987 at the age of 17. When I did finally tell someone, it seemed as though Robert Morris was right. It ruined everything. Friendships ended. Marriages of mutual family friends ended. My relationships with my parents, my siblings, friends, and others took a shift. And at 17 years old in 1987, I felt like as if it was all my fault. As I began the lifelong journey to sort through these emotional challenges, my life seemed to attract more shame, while Robert's attracted fame. Through decades of counseling off and on, seminars, books, and conversations with friends and family, I have found my way to understanding child sexual abuse, forgiveness, and healing. Part of that journey also involved a pursuit of financial restitution from Robert in 2007 at the age of 37, 20 years after I first told someone. My attorney at the time, Gittner Drummond, who is now the AG of Oklahoma, asked for $50,000 to cover past and future counseling. Robert Morris's attorney responded with a letter accusing an innocent 12-year-old Cindy of pursuing Robert, making Robert sound like the victim. The letter also offered a $25,000 settlement as long as I would sign an NDA, which I refused. That was 18 years ago. Because I refused to sign that document giving up the right to freely speak about events in my life, last Wednesday, March 12th of 2025, almost 43 years after my abuse began, Robert Morris was indicted in Oklahoma on 5 counts of lewd acts with a child, which each carry 20 years in prison. And he turned himself in to authorities just 2 days ago in Osage County in Oklahoma. Because I refused to sign an NDA, my abuser is finally being held accountable for the horrific crimes he committed against me as a child. Because I refused to sign the NDA at the age of 37, I am able to sit here at the age of 55 and share my story and be the voice for so many people who don't have the courage to come forward in hopes that I can help them.
Ms. Clemishire, I had a chance to see you come speak at a SNAP conference almost a year ago now.
August of last year.
For those that didn't get to see it, you had this incredible visual of a piece of luggage, and it caught me in the way that you drug that luggage across the stage. And with that visual, can you tell the people that are listening to you today what you meant by carrying that luggage?
Yes, I as I talked about just a few minutes ago, the shame that my life continued to attract, that was what I decided to use to show people. Like when I left home at 18 to go to college, I carried with me shame that I really couldn't even begin to understand. And as I journeyed through life, I just continued to fill that luggage, that suitcase with shame. You know, whether it was divorce, pregnancy out of wedlock. I often call myself one of the lucky ones because it wasn't a family member, it wasn't my father, and I didn't become addicted to drugs. You know, I had my other share of trouble and choices that I recently heard someone say many times, we know what someone's character is, but their choices aren't aligning with that, and it's very confusing. And that was validated when my story went public last summer, when my high school English teacher and speech teacher, who I'm still friends with today, she called me and she said, I always wondered what had happened to you because your life took a path that none of us anticipated and didn't look like who we knew you to be and how you were raised. And that is what that luggage represented, was all the choices that didn't align with my character and who I am. Just more and more shame added to what was started when I was 12 years old.
And you're in a unique position because you hear about sexual abuse taking someone's innocence.
Yes.
Representative Little has talked about it. The abuse that the offender causes is absolutely criminal.
Yes.
But Representative Little also mentioned the fact that many times where it's coming from somebody out of an organization or an entity that has the ability to recruit vulnerable populations, especially kids,
Yes.
that entity and that organization needs to take those perpetrators equally seriously, or the manner in which they come in contact with them. You've also highlighted another significant point of what I'm almost going to call this evolution. You talked about, you disclosed facts at the age of 17.
Mm-hmm.
You again, at the age of 37, found some strength again to try to get into the court system, and now here you are in your early 50s. Can you explain to us, as a policy-making legislative body, about that roller coaster of evolution for victims and when they have the strength or ability to maybe come forward or not?
Yes. I think that that's exactly what it is, a roller coaster, because at 17, when I told, I did feel as though I was the one at fault, even to the extent that Robert Morris's wife, Debbie, called to tell me she forgave me. So still trying to mature.
Let's clarify that. The wife forgave you for being a 12-year-old who
Yes.
her husband was having sex with, right?
Correct.
How did you take that? What did that do to you?
Well, at 17 and then being family friends, I was thankful because I felt like I had done something wrong. And I had been treated, though, as though I had done something wrong by Robert, like making me the guilty one or a part of something that I chose when I knew nothing. I mean, 82 was a very different time when we didn't carry computers around in our hands and we had 6 channels maybe on our televisions. So innocence was very different than it is now most of the time. But that journey from 17 to 37, it wasn't until, even with years of counseling, that I could accept the term abuse. I was 35, the first time I truly accepted and believed that he abused me, that it was criminal, and I understood what grooming was, and that changed the course of my journey to more healing, and there's anger, of course, involved in that. But I was having children. You know, I have 3 sons. They currently range from 17 to 32, and I also am a grandmother of 3. And I think that for a woman, I can only speak for myself and being a woman, but that journey involves protecting your children and how you do that and how much, feeling more shame if you talk about it publicly, We did privately go to people throughout the last however many decades, 3.5 decades, sharing with people in the pulpit in churches across the country about what he did to me and my family, in hopes that they would take him out of the pulpit, because we knew legally there was really nothing we could do at that, the time of it. So it takes a lifetime, as Elizabeth said, to process and heal, but just to have the courage to come forward and speak openly to the world, I never would have been ready until now.
The chair recognizes Elizabeth Phillips. I have you here testifying on behalf of yourself for House Bill 748. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, go ahead.
As you said, I'm Elizabeth Phillips. I'm from Dallas, Texas, District 108, where I grew up and where I still live today. Thank you to this committee, and a special thank you to Chairman Leach for authoring this bill to prohibit the misuse of NDAs against child sexual abuse and trafficking victims, and for naming it after my late brother, Trey Carlock. It honors him and my family, our loss, and the countless survivors of child sexual abuse like him who didn't survive. I'm going to read my testimony because this has been a long time coming. I've been working towards this day for 5 years, and I want to get through my testimony in the allotted time. Thank you.
Time limit doesn't apply to this bill.
Thank you.
Take your time.
Trey was my little brother who was silenced to his grave by Kanakuk Ministries, a summer camp and global enterprise based in Southwest Missouri. Trey endured a decade of grooming and child sexual abuse by their popular director, Pete Newman, followed by a re-traumatizing civil litigation process that ended with a restrictive NDA. Sadly, a lot of truth dies with people because of NDAs, and that only protects bad actors, which is contrary to public interest. To me, that is the point of Trey's Law and this hearing today: public safety, protecting children. I've actually learned more about the extent of my brother's abuse in his death than I knew in his life due to the NDA he was under. Trey told a therapist, "They will always control me and I'll never be free," before he died by suicide in August 2019. He hesitated even to tell his story in confidential therapeutic settings for fear that Kanakuk would come after him again like they did an earlier John Doe. Now that I know what I know and have caught my breath, I'm trying to be a voice for Trey and the countless other victims of childhood crimes who are suffering in the shadows due to NDAs that restrict them from speaking in settings like this. Since my family was public about Trey's Kanakuk camp's abuse in his Dallas Morning News obituary, we've heard from so many other victim families with similar stories. 17 suicides and lives wrecked beyond belief all over the world. Kanakuk survivors assembled an advocacy website called Facts About Kanakuk, which launched in 2021 and has since received continuous tips with hundreds of abuse allegations against more than 65 unique perpetrators associated with Kanakuk, dating from 1958 to today. Texas is one of Kanakuk's largest markets. The same family that has been at the helm of Kanakuk throughout these decades. While victims have been lawfully hushed by NDAs, Kanakuk and its insurers demanded, behind closed doors, with attorneys who would gaslight and intimidate victims in depositions that led my brother to a psychotic break. My brother had many layers to his journey of injustice. First, he was groomed and abused from age 7 to 17 by a serial sex offender who was sentenced to 3 life terms in 2010. Trey was 20 years old when Pete went to prison. Then Trey was forced by the civil statute of limitations in Texas to file his civil case against Kanakuk before the age of 23, while he was just trying to finish college and also process unimaginable trauma amidst a Christian culture applauding Kanakuk and hailing its CEO, Joe White, as a spiritual hero. Trey's civil case ended with a settlement that included a restrictive NDA, making Kanakuk and its representatives another perpetrator of abuse in Trey's tragic and unnecessary demise. Institutional abuse on top of sexual abuse. I've seen firsthand how NDAs and child sexual abuse settlements conceal decades of abuse for the sake of personal and institutional protection. Until very recently, when some brave survivors broke their NDAs to speak with investigative journalists, dozens of Kanakuk victims believed that they were the only ones who had been abused there because the story barely reached the media. I've spoken with many men and women who spent 20 plus years believing that they were the only child abused at that summer camp or one of its affiliated entities. An Oklahoma woman in her 70s who was sexually assaulted the very first year Kanakuk opened its doors to girls shared her story of feeling crazy her entire life until she stumbled upon an article about 3 years ago that exposed the evils of Kanakuk. I was the first person she'd ever told, besides her husband. Delayed disclosure is normal for victims of child sexual abuse, if they ever disclose at all. So, when the floodgates opened and survivors coalesced around a petition asking Kanakuk to release victims from their NDAs, we garnered nearly 30,000 signatures. Kanakuk's response was a public statement and blatant lie that they do not use NDAs. Those of us who knew better called that out, so then they said they do use NDAs, but it's only at the request of the victims. Survivors called out that lie, and Kanakuk changed their tune again, admitting in an open letter from CEO and board chair Joe White that they do use NDAs, but it's their insurance company that makes them do it. And in order to avoid repercussions, victims should not disclose their settlement terms. Kanakuk won't come clean, and we're not giving them any more chances. We're going to change the law. The law on NDAs must be clarified because we cannot trust institutions to do the right thing. It's no exaggeration for me to claim this as a matter of life and death. I think we know what child sexual abuse does to a person's life, does to a kid. And I think we also know how healing happens. It's by sharing your story in safe places, finding support and solidarity. That's the whole basis of talk therapy and the Alcoholics Anonymous model, for example. When you take someone's voice away, especially a child's, you take away their most linear path to healing. Trey's law should be a welcomed and minimum measure of justice so that future victims of childhood crimes do not have my brother's outcome. There's a quote that says, "Shame dies when stories are told in safe places." Tennessee made itself safer in 2018 when they became the first U.S. state to pass a bill prohibiting NDAs in civil child sexual abuse settlements. And 18 states, along with U.S. Congress, have clarified the NDA issue for adult survivors of sexual assault. It's time we do the same for children, and Texas can be a leader on this. NDAs are for trade secrets, not trauma secrets. I get asked a lot since becoming more public about this issue on a national level. Why would your brother sign an NDA? Was he physically forced? Well, actually, when you've been abused and gaslighted and re-traumatized by intimidating lawyers on both sides who want to close a case, you're exhausted just trying to function. And then opposing counsel offers you 7 figures if you just sign on the dotted line. You need to be able to pay for treatment and a lifetime of care. You want to move on and hopefully heal. So you accept the payout, but it feels like a bribe. My brother referred to his settlement as blood money, as if he had betrayed his own soul to keep Kanakuk's secrets, and it killed him. So, I'm here before this committee to ask you to please remember Trey. I'm asking the Texas legislature to pass Trey's law this session as an urgent matter of public safety. I'm proud to be Trey's sister, and I hope Texas will be proud of Trey's law. Thank you, and I'm prepared to take questions.
It's an honor to work with you on this. Representative Little, it's great to have you on the dais today and your role as a legislator and as a skilled attorney, and would love to have you share some words with the committee.
Thank you, Chairman Leach. It is extremely generous of you and your committee to invite me here today. I've had the pleasure of working with you on this bill. You've been very receptive and kind in considering potential amendments to the bill, and I think your committee sub does a very good job of laying out and addressing the problem. I want to just provide briefly the perspective of a practitioner who has worked on child sex abuse cases involving churches, summer camps, schools, ministries. I've been in the room when these cases have been settled. Some of the child sex abuse cases I've worked on have been horrific. One involving a 12-year-old girl at our church summer camp who was molested by a pastor. And oftentimes the victim of sexual abuse at the hands of a pastor, family friend, a teacher is in a mediation room, and they're faced with the decision of whether to settle their case to receive some sum of money that is going to help them with their lifetime of therapy and counseling, to help them heal, to compensate them for the soul murder, which is really what sex abuse is, of having undergone that. And typically a condition that is presented by defendants in cases like these is a nondisclosure or confidentiality agreement, so that victim can really never share their story outside of either a law enforcement context or under a subpoena when compelled to do so. I think we as a state need to decide that those types of agreements are void as against public policy. And I will cite to you a pretty significant example. So we're joined, I saw in the gallery this morning, Robert Downen is here. Robert Downen wrote a piece for the Houston Chronicle about the Southern Baptist Convention and the, I'll call it, prolific environment of abuse that exists not only in the Southern Baptist Convention, but throughout other denominations as well. And one of the reasons that it exists so pervasively is the culture of silence that really surrounds the issue. It's you hire a bad employee, they do something horrible, oh no, that's terrible, let's settle the claim, there's a non-disclosure agreement, and then that pastor, teacher, volunteer moves on to another church and they continue their acts of abuse. So the incomplete flow of information in our society about who the abusers are and what they have done in some ways perpetuates the abuse against people throughout, not only throughout Texas, but through other parts of the country as well. And so when I've been in those rooms with plaintiffs and I've been presented with those non-disclosure agreements, I've said, we're not going to sign it. And we'll agree to keep the terms of our settlement confidential, or how much you paid, or however you want to pay. We'll keep that confidential. But I want to empower my client to be able to tell his or her story as they become adults so that they can heal and so that other people don't suffer the same fate at the hands of the same people. I understand Ms. Clemishire is here to testify as well about what she endured at the hands of Robert Morris, who I saw was just recently taken into custody yesterday or the day before. I am here to tell you that I know for a fact that in large organizations like churches and parachurch ministries, schools, summer camps, oftentimes the board of directors or board of trustees or board of elders is aware of the abuse and participates in concealing it. And I think we as a legislature need to decide that we're not going to aid in the concealment of that information. Oftentimes, as a lawyer, it's very easy for me to say, well, I'll negotiate my way out of it. But not everyone has a lawyer. Not everyone can negotiate their way out of it. And, I can remember times where I was sitting in court or mediation going, well, I don't get to make those decisions about what's void as against public policy. Well, now I do. And the rest of us do as well. And so I thank you for your generosity, Chairman Leach, in allowing me to participate, and I look forward to hearing what these fine citizens have to say. Thank you.